this morning, which is noteworthy because just 2 days earlier, he criticized the site for violating the freedom of speech. The billionaire posted that the social media platform does not adhere to free speech principles and, quote, fundamentally undermines democracy. Musk also asked a question, quote, is a new platform needed? Violating free speech is something Twitter has been accused of many times before. This is not the first time. And attempts at creating new alternative social media sites are seeking to rival Twitter, such as the conservative Learning, Parler, and most recently, former President Trump's Truth Social platform. So let's talk about this, whether Elon Musk could create another social media platform and how social platforms impact free speech. We have Andrew Geronimo, director of the First Amendment Clinic at Case Western Reserve University. Andrew, welcome to Morning Rush. Thanks for joining us. So first, Andrew, what about the point Elon Musk is making about free speech and Twitter? Is it possible to have a platform that allows people to say what they want, but then not punish them for saying what they want?
Well, it's a complicated question.
Right.
First, because certainly the internet has democratized speech, whereas we all have access to accounts on these platforms where we can make our thoughts known and divulge our thoughts. But it's also important to know that the platforms themselves, these social media sites, have their own free speech interests at stake. The Twitters and the Facebooks of the world are interested in cultivating a user base, and there's necessarily some First Amendment protected speech, some free speech that they don't want. Things like pornography, hate speech are entitled to some First Amendment protection. And in order for these sites to cultivate a user base, they almost necessarily have to moderate some of these clearly protected items.
Right. So Elon Musk is the richest man in the world and a tech giant. So why would he be the right guy to launch a rival to Twitter? Is that possible? And is it likely that we'll see Elon Musk or another company, a brand, create an additional social media platform?
Well, certainly he has the resources
Right.
and I would guess the know-how to create one of these websites. I think where the rubber would meet the road here is the difficulty in crafting those content moderation policies so that you have a service that people want to use and sort of adheres to the values that he's talking about. I think we've seen with other iterations, you mentioned former President Trump's Truth Social, that itself has content moderation policies that ban certain First Amendment protected conduct. So I think really it's easier said than done is what I would say on that.
Right. And so how are social media companies hindering or helping free speech, would you say? Because there is that line where, you really shouldn't cross it. But then you also have to think about the whole topic of free speech and that we deserve to be able to, we have the right of free speech.
Right. Well, again, it helps that the internet and these social media platforms have reduced barriers to speech, wherein people who a generation ago would have had zero access to the type of audience and virality that they have today now are able to do that under the right conditions. But they have to, again, we have to be careful about what is on there and the potential downstream harmful effects of that. And also just to make it, again, a usable service. If we didn't do any content moderation on any of these sites, at least in my opinion, they would be overrun with the things that, make us click the Xbox on our computer or, switch to a different app on our phones. Your spam, your harmful information, your pornography, again, your offensive speech and things like that. So I think this ecosystem, this online ecosystem works best if there are a diversity of sites where people can sort of pick and choose between their things. But there has to be some room in this environment for people to make decisions based on something other than the constitutional protections for speech in the United States.
So it's been discussed on Capitol Hill, but there's been very little movement so far. We're talking about regulations relating to the First Amendment. How likely is it that we're going to see any new laws or regulations?
It's a very hot topic now. There's a statute called Section 230. It's part of the original Communications Decency Act, and it basically dictates how these websites could potentially or really can't be liable for what their users post. It's a law that came into play between the tension of whether sort of precursors to your social media sites, your bulletin board systems, were liable for content their users posted, based on whether they moderate it or not. So there were a series of decisions that said if a website deletes anything, then all of a sudden they're liable for everything. Section 230 makes it so that the websites aren't liable as speakers of their users' content, but they're also not liable to speakers for what they take down. It's supposed to give them what Congress called a good faith basis to moderate their own stuff, so that a certain website can say, we're a family-friendly website, although this is protected speech under the First Amendment, we are not going to allow it under our policies because we want to cultivate a certain kind of user base. There's lots of potential amendments to Section 230, discussions on ways to change it. But in my opinion, the problems that most people have with Section 230 are really problems with the First Amendment, where one, the government can't compel certain types of speech, and two, the government can't make these websites host certain things.
All right, Andrew Geronimo, director of the First Amendment Clinic at Case Western Reserve University. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.